The Carvathy war room was big and cold. Everything was made of glass that glowed with blue light. The alien commanders stood in rows, watching screens that floated in the air. Admiral Jake Wilson stood in the center of the room. He was the only human there. His black uniform looked plain next to the shiny armor of the aliens. He kept his hands behind his back and watched the main screen without moving. Next to him stood Captain Lisa Martinez. She tried to look calm, but her hands were tight fists. The screen showed their ships, and she knew how bad things looked. 7 ships, said Supreme Commander Vexthen. He was 10 feet tall with purple skin and long arms that moved like snakes. When he laughed, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. The humans bring 7 ships to fight us. We have 500. The other Carvathy commanders laughed too. The sound filled the room like thunder. Some pointed at the screen with their tentacles. Others shook their heads, which meant they thought the humans were stupid. General Zarklon stepped forward. His 4 eyes looked at the small human ships on the screen. They were not even warships. They were cargo carriers and mining vessels. The humans had painted them gray and added extra metal plates to the sides. "Look at these toys," Zarklon said. "My smallest fighter could destroy all 7 without trying." Do the humans really think old cargo ships can fight the Carvathy Empire? More laughter filled the room. Admiral Wilson did not move. He did not speak. He just watched the screen. "Admiral Wilson," said Vexthen, "your people are brave but foolish. You defend Haven Colony with ships that carry rocks and supplies. We offer you one chance to surrender. Save your people from death." Captain Martinez looked at Wilson. She waited for him to speak. The whole room waited. Wilson finally turned to face the aliens. His gray eyes were calm. "Thank you for the offer," he said. "We need time to think about it." This made the Carvathy laugh even harder. They thought Wilson was scared. They thought he was buying time before giving up. Commander Texvar floated closer on his hover platform. Carvathy did not like to walk. They thought it was beneath them. "How much time do you need, human?" "An hour. A day. It will not matter. Your 7 ships cannot win." "Ships are just metal and engines," Wilson said quietly. "What matters is who flies them." The Carvathy did not understand. They had the best technology in the galaxy. Their ships were faster, stronger, and had better weapons. Numbers always won battles. Everyone knew this. "Humans are new to space," said another commander. "You have been flying between stars for only 50 years. We have ruled space for 3,000 years. You cannot teach us about war." Wilson nodded slowly. "You are right. We are new to space. But humans have been fighting for much longer than 50 years. He turned back to the screen. The 7 human ships looked very small next to the hundreds of Carvathy vessels. But Wilson saw something the aliens did not see. He saw the asteroid field around Haven Colony. He saw how these ships moved differently from the Carvathy. He saw possibility where they saw certain defeat. The meeting ended with more laughter. The Carvathy gave the humans 6 hours to surrender. They were sure the humans would give up. No one could win with 7 old ships against 500 warships. As Wilson and Martinez left the war room, she whispered, "They think we're finished." "Good," Wilson replied. "Let them think that. Pride makes people blind." They returned to their small shuttle. Through the windows, they could see the massive Carvathy fleet. The ships were beautiful and deadly, like knives made of starlight. But Wilson smiled. He knew something the Carvathy did not know. Sometimes the smallest dog has the biggest bite, and humans had been the smallest dogs on Earth for a very long time before they learned to bite back. The shuttle flew toward the 7 human ships. The battle would begin soon. Colonel Frank Johnson floated through the narrow hallway inside the ship Determination. The walls were rough metal, not smooth like military ships. This used to be a cargo hauler. Now it was their flagship. Johnson grabbed a handle and pulled himself into the weapon room. His crew was there, working without rest. They had not slept for 3 days. Dark circles showed under their eyes, but nobody complained. "How are the mining lasers?" Johnson asked. Master Chief Karen White looked up from her work. Her hands were black with grease. "We changed 6 more lasers, sir. They can now cut through ship armor instead of rocks. But we need more time." Time was what they did not have. The Carvathi would attack in 4 hours. "Do what you can," Johnson said. He pushed off the wall and floated to the next room. Everywhere on the ship, people worked. They turned mining tools into weapons. They changed cargo holds into shield generators. They made regular engines work harder than they were meant to. On the bridge, Admiral Wilson stood with his officers. The room was small and cramped. 7 captains looked at maps on old screens. These were not the fancy holograms the Carvathi used. These were basic displays that flickered sometimes. "Report," Wilson said. Captain Paul Davis spoke first. He commanded the mining ship Persistence. "My ship is ready. We loaded the asteroid cutters with explosive charges. They're not pretty, but they'll work." Captain John Miller nodded. He ran the hauler Defiance. "Same here. My crew put armor plates on all weak spots. We also filled the cargo bay with metal scraps. Could be useful." Each captain gave their report. None of it sounded good. They had old ships with mining equipment pretending to be weapons. The Carvathi had real warships with plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. "What about the special surprise?" Wilson asked. Commander Elena Rodriguez smiled. She was the fleet's engineer. 3 months of work paid off. Every asteroid in the field has charges inside. We put them there while mining. The Carvathi never noticed. "Good," Wilson said. "What else?" Lieutenant Sandra Kim raised her hand. She was young, just out of the academy. "Sir, I've been studying Carvathi battle videos. They always fight the same way. Always in formation. Always by the book." "And?" Wilson asked. "They expect us to fight like them. In lines, following rules." Kim's eyes were bright. "But we don't have to follow their rules." Wilson smiled. It was the first time he smiled all day. "Exactly right, Lieutenant. We're not going to fight like them. We're going to fight like humans." Captain Robert Garcia spoke up. "Sir, the colony sent a message. The families want to evacuate. They think we should run." The room got quiet. Everyone knew running was not an option. The Carvathi would catch them, and then they would take Haven Colony. It would become a slave world like all the others. "Tell the colony to stay strong," Wilson said. "We're not running. We're fighting." In the engine room of the Determination, Chief Engineer Tony Williams checked the power systems one more time. The old reactor was pushed to its limit. Red warning lights blinked everywhere. "She's running hot," said his assistant, Amy Chen. "If we push harder, something might break." Williams patted the reactor housing. "She'll hold. These old ships are tough, tougher than those pretty Carvathi vessels." Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. On the Tenacity, weapons officer Sam Foster discovered the mining laser frequency could match Carvathi shield harmonics. On the Endurance, pilot Julie Thompson practiced impossible maneuvers between asteroids. The humans had 3 hours left. They used every minute. They checked every system. They practiced every move. They prepared for a battle everyone said they would lose. Admiral Wilson made one last tour of his fleet. 7 ships, 300 crew members, against 500 enemy vessels with technology centuries ahead. But Wilson remembered history. David beat Goliath. The Spartans held Thermopylae. The British won the Battle of Britain. Sometimes the smallest force could win the biggest victory. "All ships, this is Wilson," he said over the comm. "The Carvathi think we're finished. Let's show them what humans can do." The clock kept ticking. The Carvathi fleet moved closer, and 7 small ships waited in the asteroid field, ready to make history. The Carvathi fleet moved like a giant wave through space. 500 ships in perfect rows. Each ship was the same distance from the others. Their purple shields glowed in the darkness. They looked beautiful and deadly. Admiral Wilson watched from the bridge of the Determination. The enemy ships filled his entire screen. "Distance?" he asked. 50,000 kilometers in closing, reported Commander Elena Rodriguez. "They'll reach weapon range in 10 minutes. The 7 human ships waited in the asteroid field. They looked like mice hiding from eagles. The asteroids were huge chunks of rock and ice, some as big as mountains. They floated slowly around Haven Colony. "All ships, hold position," Wilson ordered. "Remember the plan. Wait for my signal." On the Carvathy command ship, Supreme Commander Vexthan sat in his floating throne. He watched the human ships with his 4 eyes. They had not moved. They had not surrendered. This confused him. "The humans are still there," said General Zarklon. "They actually plan to fight." Vex then waved a tentacle. "Let them try. It will be over quickly. Order the first squadron to advance." 50 Carvathy destroyers moved forward. They broke from the main fleet and headed toward the asteroid field. Their weapons powered up. Blue energy crackled along their hulls. Captain Lisa Martinez gripped her command chair. "They're coming," she said, "just like we thought they would." "Steady," Wilson replied. "Let them get closer." The Carvathy ships entered the asteroid field. They moved carefully between the huge rocks. Their formation stayed perfect. Their shields pushed smaller rocks aside. "Sir, they're targeting us," said Lieutenant Chris Baker. His voice was tight with fear. "Not yet," Wilson said. He watched the distance counter. "Not yet." The Carvathy opened fire. Blue plasma bolts shot through space. They hit the asteroids around the human ships. Rock exploded. Ice turned to steam. The human ships shook from the impacts. "Now," Wilson shouted, "all ships, scatter. Execute pattern Alpha." The 7 human ships burst into motion. They shot in different directions like startled birds. Each ship dove between asteroids, using the rocks as shields. The Carvathy commanders laughed. "They run like scared animals," said Commander Texfar. "Chase them down." But something strange happened. The human ships moved in ways that seemed impossible. They spun and twisted between asteroids. They scraped so close to rocks that paint came off their hulls. They flew upside down and sideways. Captain John Miller pushed his ship Defiance through a gap barely wider than his vessel. His crew held their breath. Metal screamed against rock. Sparks flew, but they made it through. "These humans are insane," muttered a Carvathy pilot. His targeting computer could not lock onto the wild movements. Admiral Wilson had studied the Carvathy for months. He knew their weakness. They fought by rules. They stayed in formation. They did what their computers told them. But humans knew something else. Sometimes crazy worked better than careful. "Team 2, execute pinball," Wilson ordered. 3 human ships began bouncing between asteroids like balls in an old game. They used the rock's gravity to change direction suddenly. The Carvathy weapons could not track them. Captain Robert Garcia saw his chance. A Carvathy destroyer had stopped to recalculate its targeting solution. Garcia's mining laser was already aimed. The beam shot out, designed to cut through solid rock. It found a weak spot in the alien shields. The Carvathy ship's shield flickered and died. Atmosphere vented from a hole in its hull. The destroyer spun out of control. "First kill," Garcia shouted. His crew cheered. The news spread through the human fleet. They had hurt a Carvathy ship. The mighty empire could bleed. But the battle was just beginning. More Carvathy ships entered the asteroid field. Their weapons lit up space with deadly fire. Rocks exploded everywhere. The humans kept moving, kept dodging, kept fighting. Supreme Commander Vexthan frowned for the first time. This was not going as planned. The humans fought like no enemy he had ever seen. They broke every rule of space combat. "Send in the 2nd squadron," he ordered. His voice was less confident now. "Crush them." The asteroid field became a storm of weapons fire and exploding rocks, and in that storm, 7 small ships danced with death. The second Carvathy squadron entered the asteroid field, 100 ships this time. They spread out to trap the humans. Their commanders were angry now. No one made fools of the Carvathy Empire. Admiral Wilson watched his screens. Red dots for enemies, blue dots for friends. The red dots were everywhere. All ships, prepare for Phase 2, he ordered. Remember, timing is everything. Deep in the asteroid field, Lieutenant Commander Susan Park waited in her ship. Her finger rested on a special button. 3 months ago, her crew had placed charges in hundreds of asteroids. Now it was time to use them. Targets entering the kill zone, reported her weapons officer. 30 seconds. The Carvathy ships pushed deeper into the field. They were confident again. Their weapons locked onto the human vessels. Their shields were at full power. Victory seemed certain. 20 seconds, counted Park. 10. 5. Now. She pressed the button. Nothing happened for 1 heartbeat. 2 heartbeats. Then the asteroid field exploded. Hundreds of mining charges went off at once. The explosions were not big enough to destroy ships, but they did something else. Each blast sent out an electromagnetic pulse. These pulses washed over the Carvathy vessels. Suddenly, Carvathy screens went fuzzy. Targeting computers reset. Shield generators stuttered. For a few seconds, the mighty warships were half-blind and confused. "Their shields are down," shouted Tactical Officer Daniel Lee from the Persistence. "Hit them now." The human ships struck like angry wasps. Mining lasers meant for cutting rock sliced into Carvathy hulls. Cargo haulers rammed smaller fighters. The humans fought dirty, and they fought hard. Captain Robert Garcia found another target. His laser cut through a Carvathy cruiser's engine. The ship spun wild, crashing into an asteroid. 2 more enemies tried to help. They collided with each other in the confusion. On the Defiance, Captain John Miller had a crazy idea. He opened his cargo bay doors. Inside were tons of metal scraps and mining waste. He flew over 3 Carvathy fighters and dumped everything. The metal chunks hit the fighters like giant shotgun pellets. Without shields, the Carvathy ships took heavy damage. 1 exploded. 2 others limped away, leaking air and fluids. "Human tactics make no sense," screamed a Carvathy commander. "They fight like madmen." Commander Alice Murphy proved this point. Her ship was damaged. 1 engine was dead. Most captains would retreat. Instead, she aimed her ship at a Carvathy destroyer and pushed her remaining engine to full power. Her crew deployed mining drones just before impact. The drones grabbed onto the enemy hull. Their cutting torches, made to dig through asteroids, began eating through the destroyer's armor. The Carvathy tried to shake off the drones. They spun their ship. They scraped against asteroids. Nothing worked. The little robots kept cutting, kept digging, kept destroying. Meanwhile, Captain Tony Williams used his cargo hauler like a giant hammer. He positioned above a huge asteroid, then used his tractor beam to pull it down. The asteroid crashed into a group of Carvathy ships, like a bowling ball hitting pins. "Impossible," Vex then shouted from his command ship. He watched his perfect fleet turn into chaos. "Send all squadrons. Overwhelm them." But the asteroid field was the humans' home ground. They knew every rock, every gap, every gravity well. The more Carvathy ships that entered, the more confused the battle became. Captain Maria Gonzalez showed incredible skill. Her ship lost main power after taking hits, but she used emergency thrusters and the asteroid's gravity to keep moving. She turned her dead ship into a guided missile, ramming a Carvathy command vessel. Her crew escaped in life pods just before impact. The collision destroyed both ships, but the message was clear. Humans would pay any price to win. Admiral Wilson coordinated the chaos. "Blue team, execute Whirlpool. Red team, begin Hammer Strike. Don't let them regroup." The 7 human ships had become 7 nightmares for the Carvathy. They appeared from behind asteroids, struck hard, then vanished again. They used every dirty trick, every desperate move, every insane tactic. The mighty Carvathy fleet was learning a hard lesson. Sometimes the smallest enemy is the most dangerous, especially when that enemy has nothing to lose and everything to fight for. The battle raged for 2 hours. The Carvathy adapted to the human tricks. They stopped flying in tight formations. They kept their ships farther apart. They used shorter shield cycles to prevent complete failure. Supreme Commander Vexthen stood on his bridge, studying the battle. His 4 eyes narrowed. "These humans learn too," he said. "But so do we. Change tactics. Use the swarm pattern." The Carvathy ships began moving differently. Instead of neat lines, they spread out like angry bees. They attacked from all directions at once. The humans found it harder to hide. Admiral Wilson saw the change immediately. "They're learning," he told Captain Martinez. "Time for new tricks." On the Persistence, Commander Elena Rodriguez had been working on something special. She studied the Carvathy shields during the battle. Every shield had a rhythm, like a heartbeat. If you matched that rhythm, you could slip through. "I found it," she shouted. "Their shields pulse at 3.7 megahertz. If we tune our lasers to that frequency, we can punch through easier." The word spread quickly through the human fleet. Ships began adjusting their mining lasers. It was not perfect, but it helped. More Carvathy ships started taking damage. Captain Paul Davis used this new knowledge well. His ship danced between 3 Carvathy cruisers. His modified laser found the rhythm of their shields. One by one, he put holes in their hulls. The cruisers had to retreat for repairs. But the Carvathy kept coming. They had lost 50 ships so far. The humans had lost none. This made them angry and desperate. They started using bigger weapons, taking bigger risks. A Carvathy battleship fired its main gun. The beam was as wide as a human ship. It hit an asteroid, turning it to dust. The shockwave knocked the Defiant spinning. Captain John Miller fought to control his ship. Warning lights flashed everywhere. "Hull breach in Section 5. Someone shouted, "We're losing air." Miller's crew rushed to seal the hole. They used emergency foam and metal patches. The ship held together, barely. But Miller had an idea. He let his ship keep spinning, making it look more damaged than it was. 3 Carvathy fighters moved in for the kill. They thought the Defiance was finished. Miller waited until they were close, then fired all his mining charges at once. The fighters vanished in balls of fire. "Never count humans out," Miller said with a grim smile. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. The humans took damage but kept fighting. They used broken ships as weapons. They turned disadvantages into advantages. Captain Susan Park's ship lost half its systems. She could barely steer, but she noticed something. When her damaged engine leaked plasma, it confused Carvathy sensors. She began using the leak like a smoke screen, hiding other human ships behind the interference. The Carvathy tried new weapons. They used gravity bombs that pulled asteroids together. They fired nanomissiles that ate through metal. They even tried ramming attacks like the humans. But for every Carvathy adaptation, the humans found an answer. When gravity bombs pulled asteroids together, humans used the new clusters as better cover. When nanomissiles attacked, they shed outer hull plates like a snake shedding skin. Commander Alice Murphy discovered that Carvathy ships had blind spots directly above and below. She started attacking from these angles. Other human captains copied her tactic. Soon, Carvathy ships were spinning wildly, trying to cover all directions. "They're like water," reported General Zarklon to Vexthen. "Every time we grab them, they slip away. Every time we adjust, they change again." The battle had become a deadly dance of adaptation. Both sides learned from each other. Both sides evolved their tactics. But the humans had one advantage. They were used to adapting. They had survived on Earth by being flexible, creative, and stubborn. Admiral Wilson watched his battered fleet continue fighting. His ships were damaged. His people were tired. But they were still alive, still fighting, still learning. "All ships," he called out, "prepare for Phase 3. It's time to show them our final surprise." The asteroid field had become a graveyard of broken ships, but the battle was far from over. The real test was about to begin. The Carvathi had lost nearly 100 ships. Their perfect fleet was in chaos, but they still outnumbered the humans 50-1. Victory seemed certain if they could just pin down these slippery enemies. Admiral Wilson knew his people were reaching their limit. His ships were held together with emergency repairs. His crews had been fighting for 3 hours straight, but he had saved one last card to play. "All ships, form up on me," Wilson ordered. Pattern Omega. The 7 human ships began moving toward each other. This surprised everyone, including the humans. They had spent the whole battle staying apart. Now they were grouping up. "What are they doing?" asked General Zarklon. "They make themselves an easy target." Supreme Commander Vex then sensed a trap. But what kind? The humans had already used their asteroid bombs. Their ships were damaged. What else could they have? Lieutenant Sam Foster on the Tenacity had spent the battle studying Carvathi technology. He noticed something important. Their shields worked like a net, with each ship supporting the others. But this network had a weakness. "Sir, I can disrupt their shield network," Foster reported to Wilson. "If I pulse our mining laser at the right frequency, it will create feedback. Their shields will hurt each other instead of protecting." "Do it," Wilson ordered. Foster's laser fired. The beam looked normal, but it carried a special signal. When it hit the nearest Carvathi ship, something strange happened. That ship's shield began to pulse oddly. The pulse spread to nearby ships like a virus. Suddenly, Carvathi's shields across the fleet began to flicker. The more ships that were close together, the worse it got. Their own defensive network was turning against them. "Shields failing," shouted Carvathi commanders. "Break formation. Get distance." But as the Carvathi ships tried to spread out, the humans struck. All 7 ships fired their mining lasers at once, targeting the command vessels. Without shields, the Carvathi commanders were vulnerable. Captain Maria Gonzalez, who had survived her ramming attack in a life pod, was picked up by the Endurance. She took command of its weapons. Her targeting was perfect. She hit a Carvathi admiral's ship right in the bridge. The alien command ship spun out of control. Without leadership, nearby vessels hesitated. They did not know what to do. The Carvathi always followed orders. Without orders, they froze. Commander Patricia Brown saw the confusion and acted. Her ship, the Tenacity, was the least damaged. She led a charge right through the middle of the Carvathi formation. The other human ships followed. It was insane. 7 small ships charging hundreds of warships. But the Carvathi were confused. Their shields were failing, and their commanders were not responding. Some ships fired at the humans. Others fired at nothing. Some crashed into each other trying to dodge. "Press the attack," Wilson shouted. "Don't let them regroup." Captain John Miller, despite his damaged ship, performed an incredible maneuver. He flew the Defiance in a spiral pattern around a Carvathi battleship. His mining laser cut a continuous line around its hull, like peeling an apple. The battleship split into 2 pieces. The news of this feat spread through both fleets. If humans could destroy a battleship with a mining laser, what else could they do? Fear began to spread through the Carvathi fleet. They had never seen enemies fight like this. Every rule of space combat was being broken. Every advantage they had was being turned against them. Lieutenant Sandra Kim had studied Carvathi psychology. She knew they valued order above all else. So she broadcast a message on all Carvathi channels. "Your formation is broken. Your shields are down. Your commanders are defeated. You have lost control." It was partly true and partly bluff. But the Carvathi believed it. They saw their scattered fleet, their failing systems, their silent commanders. Panic began to spread. Some Karvathi ships began to retreat without orders. Others continued fighting, but without coordination. The mighty fleet that had terrorized the galaxy was falling apart. Admiral Wilson watched the enemy crumble. His 7 battered ships had done the impossible. They had broken the spine of the Karvathi invasion force. But the battle was not over yet. The hardest part was still to come. The bridge of the Karvathi flagship was in chaos. Warning lights flashed red and yellow. Officers shouted reports that made no sense. The mighty Empire's greatest fleet was being torn apart by 7 old cargo ships. Supreme Commander Vex then stood in the center of the storm. His 4 eyes watched different screens, trying to understand what was happening. His tentacles gripped his command throne so hard they turned white. 60 more ships damage, reported an officer. The humans are everywhere at once. Impossible, Vex then muttered. But the evidence was on every screen. His fleet was losing to an enemy they had laughed at just hours ago. In space, the human ships kept attacking. They moved like sharks smelling blood. Each ship picked targets carefully. They hit command vessels, communication ships, and shield generators. They were not trying to destroy every ship. They were destroying the fleet's ability to fight as one unit. Captain Robert Garcia spotted the Karvathi supply ships hiding behind the battle line. These ships carried fuel, weapons, and spare parts. Without them, the Karvathi fleet could not continue the invasion. "Follow me," Garcia called to 2 other human ships. Time to cut their supply line. The 3 battered vessels dove through the battle. Karvathi ships fired at them but missed. The humans were too fast, too unpredictable. They reached the supply ships and opened fire. Mining lasers cut through thin cargo hulls. Supply ships exploded one after another. Fuel burned in space like small suns. Spare parts scattered like confetti. In minutes, the Karvathi fleet lost its ability to resupply. Back at Haven Colony, civilians watched the battle through telescopes. They saw explosions lighting up their sky like fireworks. Children pressed their faces against windows. Parents held their breath. "Mommy, are we winning?" asked a small girl named Emma. Her mother did not know what to say. The human ships were so small. The enemy fleet was so large. How could 7 ships defeat hundreds? But in space, those 7 ships were doing exactly that. The humans fought with everything they had. When weapons failed, they used ramming attacks. When engines died, they used momentum. When shields collapsed, they used asteroids as cover. Admiral Wilson intercepted Karvathi communications. The universal translator showed their growing panic. "Retreat to Sector 5. No hold position. Where is the command ship? Systems failing. These humans are insane." The word insane appeared over and over. The Karvathi could not understand human tactics because humans did not follow rules. They did whatever worked, whatever was needed, whatever was possible. Lieutenant Chris Baker noticed something important. "Sir, their fleet communication is breaking down. They're giving conflicting orders." Wilson nodded. "Then let's add to their confusion. Broadcast this on their frequency." He activated the comm system and spoke in the Karvathi language. "All units retreat to different sectors. Command authority transferred. New objectives uploaded." It was nonsense, but it sounded official. The fake orders made things worse for the Karvathi. Some ships obeyed. Others questioned. Arguments broke out between commanders. The fleet split into factions. Captain Lisa Martinez watched the enemy formation dissolve. "They're fighting each other now," she said in amazement. It was true. Confused Karvathi ships fired on their own allies by mistake. Others crashed together trying to follow conflicting orders. The perfect military machine had become a chaotic mess. On his flagship, Vex then finally understood. He had studied the battle data. He had watched the human tactics. He had seen his fleet crumble. Now he knew the truth. "It's not about the ships," he said quietly. His officers turned to stare. "We counted ships. We measured weapons. We calculated odds, but we forgot the most important thing. What thing, Supreme Commander? Asked General Zarklon. The minds commanding those ships. Vex Then's tentacles drooped in defeat. Humans don't think like us. They don't fight like us. They see possibilities where we see rules. They find victory where we see certain defeat. The revelation spread through the Karvathi command. They had not lost to 7 ships. They had lost to human creativity, determination, and refusal to accept defeat. The smallest fleet had contained the biggest spirits. Vex then reached for his communication device. It was time to speak directly to Admiral Wilson. The communication screen flickered to life on the Determination's bridge. Supreme Commander Vex then appeared, but he looked different now. His 4 eyes no longer held pride. His tentacles hung loose. He looked tired and defeated. Admiral Wilson, Vex then said slowly, I request a ceasefire. Wilson stood straight, his gray eyes steady. Around him, his crew held their breath. Behind him, the view screen showed the broken Karvathi fleet. Hundreds of damaged ships drifted in space. Debris floated everywhere. State your terms, Wilson replied. Vex then's tentacles moved in what humans would learn meant deep respect. We surrender, completely. We will leave human space and never return. We ask only that you allow us to collect our survivors. The bridge of the Determination went silent. 3 hours ago, the Karvathi had laughed at them. Now they were surrendering. 7 old cargo ships had defeated the galaxy's most feared fleet. Captain Lisa Martinez whispered, We won. Wilson nodded slowly. We won. The news spread through the human ships. Tired crews cheered. Some cried. Others just stared at their screens, unable to believe it was over. But Vex then was not finished speaking. Admiral, I must know. How did you do this? We had every advantage. Numbers, technology, firepower. How did 7 cargo ships defeat the Karvathi Empire? Wilson looked at his battered fleet. The Defiance was missing half its hull. The Persistence leaked atmosphere from dozen holes. Every ship showed scars from the battle, but all 7 were still fighting. You counted our ships, Wilson said, but you didn't count our spirits. You measured our weapons, but not our will to survive. You saw old cargo haulers. We saw tools waiting to be used in new ways. Vex then listened carefully. His species had ruled space for thousands of years. They had never lost a major battle. This defeat would change their entire culture. We have a saying on Earth, Wilson continued. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. You brought 500 ships. We brought 300 humans who refused to give up. The surrender ceremony happened the next day. The surviving Karvathi ships, less than 100 still operational, gathered near Haven Colony. The 7 human ships faced them, battered but proud. Vex then's message was broadcast across the galaxy. The Karvathi Empire recognizes human sovereignty. We were wrong to judge by appearance. We laughed at their tiny fleet. We did not understand that humans put giant hearts in small packages. The battle became known as the miracle of Haven Colony. Military schools throughout the galaxy studied it for generations. How did 7 converted civilian ships defeat a fleet of 500 warships? The answer was always the same: human ingenuity, determination, and the refusal to accept impossible odds. Haven Colony held a celebration that lasted 3 days. Admiral Wilson received the highest military honors, but he shared credit with every crew member, from the youngest ensign to the oldest engineer. We all won this battle, he said in his speech, from the engineers who turned mining tools into weapons, to the pilots who flew impossible maneuvers, to the colonists who never lost faith. This victory belongs to all of us. The 7 ships were preserved as monuments. School children visited them for centuries, learning about the day humanity proved that creativity beats conformity, that determination defeats numbers, and that the will to protect your home can overcome any odds. The Karvathi kept their word. They never attacked human space again. Instead, they became humanity's strongest allies. They had learned respect the hard way, but they learned it well. Years later, retired Admiral Wilson would tell young officers, "Remember Haven Colony. Remember that battle isn't about what you have, but how you use it. Give humans any tool, any ship, any chance, and they'll find a way to win. Because we don't just bring ships to a fight. We bring our hearts, our minds, and our refusal to give up." And throughout the galaxy, no one ever laughed at a human fleet again, no matter how small it looked.